The mop water smelled like lemons and old pennies. Fluorescence hummed the way insects do over something wounded. 8,000 square feet of rubber and chrome reflected Scottsdale light as if it belonged to them. A boot found Marcus's spine and shoved. He took the mat on his forearms, skin rasping, breath clipped. The bucket skidded, sloshing a gray sheet that glittered too clean for what it was. Metal on tongue. He let the taste pass. Clean faster, Derek said, stepping through the splash like it was weather. Black tights, white gloves, posture like a billboard that sold itself. 20 students polished watches, shaker cups, phones up, watched him. Watch Marcus. Fewer blinked than should have. Marcus pushed up slow, careful with wrists that had learned patience. The uniform said janitor. The hands said something else in a language only certain people read. He fixed on the mop handle, smoothed wood, nicked near the ferrule because wood didn't lie. Far above, a chain over the heavy bag made a tiny sound as the bag settled. Ping, like a metal throat clearing. Maybe spend less time staring at real fighters and more time doing your job, Derek said, turning his chin 3/4 for whatever lens would take him. He nudged the bucket with his heel. Dirty arcs leapt, slapped Marcus's shin, went quiet. Marcus righted the bucket and wrung the mop until the strings twisted like tendons. He looked at the taped octagon painted into a square blue corners, edges crisp as receipts, rents due Friday. He told himself, Maya's tuition breathes louder. Keep your head. On the far mat, Derek worked his show, rear naked choke defense. He announced, pacing in front of a mirror that made everyone thinner and meaner. Tyler, wrestler's ears. Courtyard haircut bounced in place. Game, and slightly lost. See this space? Derek flared his elbows high. Chin up, neck bright as a target. Safe lane. A few phones tilted. The red dots blinked. Nods followed. The kind you give when you're paying for certainty. No, Marcus said, too soft for anyone. A little steam escaping the teeth. Heads turned anyway. The room's AC coughed and resumed, pretending. Derek's smile landed well on cameras. Janitor wants to coach. He stepped into Marcus's air, shoes squeaking on clean rubber. You correcting me? Marcus didn't look at him. He looked at Tyler. Chin down, hands in. Peel the wrist. Turn. He kept his voice level, like reading a recipe that could keep a person alive. Show us, Derek said, a glove gesturing toward the heavy bag. He pitched it like mercy and bet on humiliation. Or admit you don't know. The crowd shifted toward steel. Metal cups clacked. The wall timer blinked. 6:03 with no shame. Marcus set the mop carefully against the wall. Wet head not touching paint. He walked to the bag and let his feet find a stance the way you find your kitchen in the dark. Don't wake a thing unless you mean to feed it. The old sentence rose uninvited. Jab. Note hard. Exact. Pop. A little air sighed from the bag. Cross. The chain ticked. Hook short. Hips turned. Knuckles honest. The chain squealed a quick half cry, half laugh. 3 punches. 10 seconds. Silence. Tyler watched like a map had unfolded. Sarah at the front desk paused her pen mid-stroke. It hung there like a hummingbird that had second thoughts. A kid in a gray hoodie forgot his phone on record and let it slide to his thigh. Derek's smile twitched, then reset. Cute. He took a step back that read as generosity on camera. He lowered his voice a floor. Disrespect me in my gym again. You'll be looking for work. Consequence. It landed exactly where it should. Right after the awe, Marcus felt the math press behind his ribs. Rent. Tuition. Groceries that pretend to last. He went back to the mop and erased his own footprints. The chain quieted. The room remembered its noises. Reset. Derek snapped at Tyler. Louder now, because volume fixes things if you believe in volume. Arms, he hesitated a fraction, chin hovering where a lesson had just touched it. Marcus worked the edges, drawing water away from feet that didn't know where to go. Derek drifted near again, the mitt grazing Marcus's forearm. Oops. The crescent of wet dried into a ghost smile. In a voice aimed at the room, not the man. Watch the pro corners when you clean. Gravity happens to everyone, he said boy once, tucked like a razor inside a friendly sentence. A couple of kids flinched and smoothed their faces back to neutral. At break, Tyler hovered by the cart. Is not kite landing. Saw you on the bag, he said. Like the bag owed you money. Bag owes everyone. Marcus said. He wrung the mop and handed him a clean towel. Chin down, he added. Softer, hands home. Tyler nodded like he'd been given contraband. Phones came out. Derek staged a mirror story. The bucket ghosting the frame. Caption drafted. Know your place. Sarah cleared her throat at the desk. Policy requires authorization for filming staff, she said. Gentle, threaded. She already had an email draft open. Subject line, Incident Staff Harassment Stone. Her drawer of manila folders had one labeled, If he burns it down. She slid it half an inch open, then closed it. Timing is a hinge. By 7, the place smelled like ammonia and triumph. Derek accidentally heel-kicked a kettlebell into Marcus's lane. It clunked and spun. Water sheeted toward Tyler's laces. He windmilled. Recovered. Face red. Careful. Derek sung. Can't break tools. His eyes added the part he didn't say. The gym emptied into hum and freeway. The big glass dimmed to a dark mirror. Marcus rolled the cart under the camera's green blink. He lifted the paper towels. The hand wraps didn't pretend to be paper. Old leather. Sweat salted. He hesitated. Then set them back. Don't wake it. Footsteps he recognized before he placed them. The door breathed, then opened. Rivera stood in the doorway, jacket over a shoulder, files under his arm, sand in the voice, history along the edges. He didn't raise a phone. He scanned the square, the chain, the man with mop water on his shoes. How long? He asked. Long enough. Marcus didn't turn the question into a confession. Rivera nodded. Once, twice, like agreeing to something that had already happened. He looked at the bag, at the carabiner's dull tooth, at the blue tape corners. He's teaching them wrong. I need the job, Marcus said. Not self-pity. Math. Needing and bleeding are separate issues. He watched the camera blink, counted 2. Men like him mistake a mirror for a window. His eyes returned to the square. You moved clean. 3 punches, Marcus said. We're not filming. He put the wraps under the towels, the way you put away a sharp knife when guests arrive. Rivera stepped closer to the blue tape. He pressed a toe against a corner, checking the hold. Like a man who still believes in rules if you tape them down. You think you can stay out of his way. I can try. He's already aiming. Rivera's gaze flicked to the exit, then the office, then the phone cradled in Sarah's palm. She didn't look up. She was writing a date on an envelope addressed to herself because Blue Steel remembers. On the way to the office for bleach, Marcus passed the heavy bag without touching it. The chain made one small, anticipatory sound, like a hinge that had just been serviced and was ready. Behind him, Rivera said it loud enough for the room. Good night, Coach. Marcus paused at the tape, pressed a heel into the edge. It held. Good night, he said. He locked up like tucking something in, not shutting something out. Scottsdale night pressed its dry palm to the glass. In the reflection, he saw himself narrow and ordinary, and not simple. He saw a square waiting for someone to decide what it was for. Outside, the parking lot lit everything too flat. He sat in his car a minute longer than he needed, hands quiet on the wheel, phone face down on the seat. He turned it over. No messages from Maya. Good. A banking alert. Not good. Tuition reminder. Worse. He pictured her at the kitchen table, hood up, writing an essay about standing up in a world that penalizes the posture. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He didn't answer. A text arrived. Keep it. If you want it to breathe in court, don't cut it. I can swear chain. He exhaled. The message sat there like an extra organ. Proof had its own weight. Back inside, Sarah slid a post-it onto the incident log. Neat block letters. Look. 37 p.m. Boy. Gravity. Mirror story. Staged W bucket. She sealed the day's notes in an envelope and walked them to the blue box on the corner. When she came back, the glass showed her a version of herself she could live with. She filed that away too. At home, Marcus set keys in a ceramic bowl that had been his mother's. The sound was a clean clunk that decided what kind of night it would be. The apartment smelled like detergent and pencil shavings. Maya's lamp threw a circle on FAFSA forms. She looked up, took him in fast. You okay? Clock ran long, he said. He didn't add the part where a man used a camera like a weapon and a room learned to clap for it. He ate rice and beans slow, stretching time like dough. He told her about an essay prompt. She told him about a video on choking defense she was cutting down to 60 seconds. They didn't say Derek's name. They didn't have to. When she slept, he stood in the kitchen and stared at the bar of light under her door until his eyes watered. The fridge hummed. The building settled like an old back. His phone, face down, pulsed an ugly little heartbeat. He flipped it. Derek had posted a still of a mop bucket, captioned, "Know your place." The comments came hot wolves, flames, men advising other men how to be. 3 hours late, the post vanished. Not soon enough. Another buzz. New message. This one short. Not Derek. No signature. A public challenge in private clothes. Friday, 9 p.m. After hours, blue square. Keep it clean. The chain sound wasn't in the room. He heard it anyway. Ping. He set the phone down like it might burn the counter and looked at his hands. Dangerous to lies, he thought, and closed his eyes. Rent. Tuition. Rules inside tap. He breathed in for 4, held for 4, out for 6. When the air came back, he picked up the phone, thumb hovering over reply, and told himself the only thing that felt like truth: if you wake a thing, you feed it. His thumb lowered. The square waited. The chain, somewhere, decided how much weight it could carry. Morning arrives, thin and clinical. Sun needles through the east glass and floats the dust like gold leaf. The floor keeps last night's scuffs the way a chalkboard keeps ghosts. Marcus keys in, thermos under his arm, nods at the camera that blinks every 2 seconds like a tired metronome, and studies the whiteboard. The day's schedule has grown teeth. Emergency deep clean 5:37. 30 p.m. circled twice in red. An arrow stabbed toward Matt's. Someone added a smiley face that looks like a bruise. He starts with corners. Spray. Squeeze. Pull. Lemon scent climbs the sinuses and sits there. The mop strings whisper over rubber. Above, the heavy bag chain gives a polite hiccup when the AC kicks, then decides silence is cheaper. By noon, the lobby turns terrarium hot. Scottsdale light bounces off chrome rigs. Motivational fonts scold from the walls. Sarah counts day passes with one hand and writes with the other dates in neat print. Nouns that could testify. A man in a short-sleeve button-down signs a guest waiver with the brisk confidence of someone who has never been told to wait. He glances past her toward the square with the blue tape corners. "You got media tonight?" he asks. "Community building," Sarah says. Neutral tone, sharp edges. At 4, Derek sweeps through the door with a duffel that looks like a car payment, and two boys orbiting close. The jaw is photogenic. The smile belongs to phones. He slaps a supplement on the front desk. We're live at 7. SAR. Logo backdrop by the cage. Make it pop. Policy on filming staff, she begins. I am staff, he says, and signs the receipt with a squeak that sounds like a knife on porcelain. Marcus empties a bottle into a bucket and watches the line foam. He doesn't look up when Derek claps him on the shoulder with a focus mitt and leaves a crescent of sweat that dries into a smudged smile. Stay on my corners, Derek says, pitching to the room while addressing one man. Gravity happens to everyone. Copy, Marcus says, and draws water away from the shoes that pay the rent. Class swells. Air goes wet. Music finds a beat and bullies it. Derek runs a sermon about humility. Chin high, arms wide, selling salvation as a posture. Phones rise like a little forest. Tyler works reps in the far lane. Left foot loads wrong. Right hand returns late. Marcus notices and files it, the way a medic files blood types, without writing them down. Reset. Derek barks. He heel kicks a kettlebell. It skids into Marcus's path and spins, a gray comet shedding mop water. Tyler stutters a step. Windmills. Doesn't fall. Derek laughs. Friendly on the outside. We can't break tools. Boys. Marcus steers the sheet toward a drain. The mop strings cling to the rubber like tired hair. Above them, the chain ticks once, disagreeing with gravity on principle. Between rounds, Tyler drifts to the cart, not quite looking at Marcus. About Friday, he says, voice skinny with hope and heat. You want me to... I can work timer? Or water? Water's good. Marcus says. He wrings the mop and hands over a folded towel that smells faintly like bleach and patience. Chin down, hands home. Yes, sire. The words land on Tyler like permission. At the front desk, Sarah slides on a headset that isn't connected to any call. On her screen, a draft email. Subject line, if he burns it down. Inside, bullet points, dates, attachments, named like evidence. Lobby cam. 321. Mauve. Incident log. Stone. PDF. Mirror story. Still, JPG. She highlights a sentence. This memo memorializes a pattern, then unhides a folder called Mail to Myself and checks the stamps. Paper is a witness that sleeps light. The investor appears just before 6, tan pressed into a suit the color of wet asphalt. He watches through glass with his arms folded, expression set to thoughtful. Head count. He asks Sarah without moving his eyes. Full at 7, she says. Stream at 7:30. Excellent. He smiles the way lawyers smile at elevators. Get me a risk memo by Monday. Soft language. Soft won't hold, she says. He pretends not to hear. They build the stream. Ring light on a tripod. Logo backdrop angled so the bucket ghosts the edge of frame. Derek checks himself in the mirror chin angle. Jawline. That casual fatigue expensive men wear for sport. Iron Forge fam. He rehearses under his breath. Tonight we're talking humility. The camera goes live. Chat scrolls in emojis, and men telling other men how to be. Derek starts his parable. A janitor who needed discipline, a leader who provided it. He says the word boy once, soft, like a kindness, practicing. Sarah writes Tuju, 11 p.m. Boy. Live on a sticky and tucks it inside the log. Tyler finishes a round with a bruise inflating under his right eye. He presses the towel to it and glances at Marcus like the question might get answered if he doesn't say it out loud. Marcus lines the squeegee with the drain and clears a lane as neat as a ledger. Friday, he says, without looking up. Timer and water. No phones. Got it. The stream ends. The room exhales. A last class trickles out through the door chime. Derek lingers with the investor by the office, talking in numbers that sound like threats. Words like exposure and liability lift and sink. The logo backdrop leans on the cage like an accusation. Rivera steps from the hallway, jacket over one shoulder, grocery receipt folded in his palm with something written on it. He stands in the empty square and feels the shape of it in his knees. His eyes track the chain, the carabiner, the tape corners relayed too bright. He's shopping a story. He tells Marcus in a voice built to cut through crowd noise without raising itself. Called a columnist I know. Wants the headline before the ink. Marcus nods at the floor. Not the man. Friday's already bought. Courts won't get there in time. Rivera says. He doesn't add. But they'll get there. He looks at the desk. Sarah is addressing an envelope to herself with a blue pen. You need anything recorded, he says. I have a phone and bad habits. Don't wake a thing unless you mean to feed it, Marcus says, and hears his own rule boomerang back at him. He looks at the tape edge near his heel and presses it down. It holds by 8. The room is just hum. AC. Distant freeway. Rubber breathing out a day of scuffs. Derek does one more lap like a landlord. He stops in front of a mirror so clean it refuses to be blamed. Streaks, he says. Marcus wipes the same 12 inches until the glass warms under friction. He doesn't look at the reflection that looks like him in a uniform. He didn't choose. He looks at the edge of the square where blue meets black, where rules pretend to be permanent. He clocks out. The plastic buttons chirp like nothing serious has ever happened here. He drives past strip malls, copy-pasted to the horizon. Palm trunks stitched to the sky with wire. A bus kneels at a corner and sighs. In the apartment, the hallway smells like microwaved broccoli and effort. Inside, Maya has FAFSA forms fanned like a gambler waiting for decent cards. She pushes a plate toward him. Rice, beans, avocado. One day past brave. You see the stream? She asks. I saw the aftermath. He says, I flagged it. She makes a face like spit she'd rather not. Came down. Then went back up on a meme account. She taps her screen, turns it, shows him a slowed clip of a mop bucket with words over it that think they're clever. She turns it back before he finishes reading. You don't have to look. I already did it for both of us. He smiles with one corner of his mouth. Eat slow. How's the essay? Prompt is, tell us about a time you stood up. She says, I wrote about staying. That'll confuse them. Good, she says. She closes the laptop. You sure about Friday? No, he says, and the truth is clean. Yes. She nods like they've concluded a business transaction. He watches her stand, rinse her plate, tuck it in the rack. The little box fan hums, and her hair lifts in a soft curve. At 11, the phone buzzes, once an unknown number, and a link, scam. Then Rivera. Then he taps, because sometimes trouble is the only proof you're awake. Audio breathes into the kitchen on cheap speaker. Gym acoustics stamped into the file hollow. A vet rubber undertone. The faint metallic ping of chain singing through duct. Derek's voice. Thinner. Still undeniable. I'm gonna break that boy down until he quits or does something stupid. Rivera's lower reply. Almost bored. That's not coaching. A little laugh from Derek that sounds like a hinge. It's branding. Marcus pauses at 7 seconds. Plays it again and again, because the air around the words matters almost more than the words. The AC hiss, the squeak of a heel, the ping, another text. Keep it. If you want it to breathe in court, don't cut it. I can swear chain. R. He sets the phone face down like a hot pan, puts both hands on the counter, and lets his head hang. Not prayer. Physics. The fridge clicks. Pipes talk in the wall. In the next room, Maya laughs once in her sleep, a sound like Mercy deciding who to visit. He sends one reply. Friday. No phones. Timer. Water. Keep your copy cold. Roger. Rivera returns. In someone else's kitchen, the investor pours one finger of something expensive he can't taste and types an email with the subject line concerns. He asks about insurance, about morale, about a plan with a name that means someone else pays. He CCs a lawyer whose tie looks like a warning and ends with, "Please advise." He sleeps the way men sleep after paperwork. Back at the gym, Sarah prints 2 copies of a memo she wrote in April. She seals one, addresses it to herself, and walks it to the blue box on the corner, because blue steel remembers and timestamps don't argue. On her way back, she passes the big front glass and sees Derek adjusting his smile in his reflection. She watches the glass fog with his breath and writes that down too. Tyler lies on his back in a room that smells like laundry and effort. He places his forearm across his throat and presses lightly, finding the tendon line where panic sneaks in. Chin down, he thinks, hands home. He types Friday in his calendar and sets an alarm for 8:45 p.m. water timer. The phone blinks agreement. Night thins. The city goes fan noise and far siren. Marcus stands in Maya's doorway and watches the slow lift and fall under her blanket. He kisses 2 fingers and touches the doorframe, because houses remember that from men. He turns back to the kitchen, picks up the phone, and opens a new note. Tape corners, relay before, ice, 2 bags, towels, 3 clean, wraps, left then right, even layers, breathe, 446. Don't wake more than you can feed. He pockets the note like a talisman. The lemon smell on his shirt has faded to something metallic and old. Somewhere in the city, a flag chain ticks once in the wind, metal deciding whether to speak. In here, the room decides to be quiet. The hour stretches inward, outward, waiting for the square to become what it was built to be. Phoenix does heat like a dare. By late afternoon, the front glass turns the lobby into a terrarium. The rubber floor exhales a chemical tang that rides the back of the throat. Phones blink awake the second they cross the threshold, as if the room has a signal of its own. Derek is already loud, wrist wraps bright as teeth. Pedro la swaga. He paces under the mirror and lets the cameras preen him. We're going live in an hour, he tells Sarah without needing an answer. Community building stream. Engagement. Put the logo backdrop near the cage. Offset it so the square pops. Sarah writes, logo backdrop on a post-it she doesn't need, and lays a thin manila folder on the desk with the reverence of someone setting down evidence. The folder is half out of the drawer, as if any moment might be the right one. She pushes it back in. Timing is a hinge. Evening class swells and the AC fights. Music finds a beat and bullies it. Derek sells confidence like it's buy one, get one. Chin high, arms wide, posture that pretends to be theology. Tyler loops close, bruised under one eye, hungry as a pup that keeps missing the bowl. He soaks the lesson because he pays for it in dignity. Between rounds, Derek drifts toward the janitor cart like the tide to rock. He drags 2 fingers across the mop handle, wipes them together as if he's handled dirt. Saw a rumor, he says, voice pitched for the room. Old man claims you're somebody. He smiles, as if forgiveness is a favor. Men who fake greatness always end up loving mops. Marcus aligns squeegee to drain and draws a clean river the floor can drink. Water finds low, he says, mild enough to pass for weather. At the desk, Sarah slides a headset on no call, just camouflage, and opens a draft titled if he burns it down. She scrolls through file names that read like witnesses: Lobbycam, 407, MUV, Ringlight, Live, Clip, MP4, Incident Log, Stone, PDF. She highlights a line. This memo memorializes a pattern, then minimizes it because cameras like to catch reflections. The stream boots at 7. Ring light softens faces to the texture of lies. Derek centers himself and lets his voice go syrup over gravel. Iron Forge fam. Tonight, we're talking humility. Comments rise like gnats, wolf heads. Fire. Men teaching men how to be men. He tells a story about a custodian who needed discipline. He says, boy once, casual as lint. The chat applauds. Sarah writes Tuju, 12 p.m. Boy, live on a yellow square and tucks it under the manila's lip. On the mat, Tyler stumbles a shot and laughs too fast. Between rounds, he drifts to the cart. Timer Friday. He asks, eyes on the bucket. So the question doesn't cost extra. Timer and water. Marcus says, no phones. Got it. Tyler nods like he's been handed a map. He palms a clean towel and returns to his orbit. Stream ends. The echo hangs like heat. Derek films one more story alone in the mirror. Caption drafts in his head, know your place. Eyes cutting past himself to the square where confidence likes to pretend. Rivera steps out of the office hallway with his jacket over his shoulder and the look of a man who's decided which ditch he'll die in. He's shopping a story. He says, quiet. Called a guy I know at the paper. Wants the headline to arrive before the facts. Marcus rolls the cart to the wall and rests one hand on the mop handle like it's a cane he doesn't need. Headlines are just doors without rooms. He says, make a room then. Rivera answers. He nods at the blue tape corners. Make your box and invite him in. Silence takes a chair. The AC sighs. The heavy bag chain ticks once and decides to be steel again. Derek lingers with an investor who wears a tan like a credential. Through glass, their reflection looks like money talking to itself. Words leak exposure, liability, narrative, and sink into the rubber. When the last kid drags his gym bag through the chime and the ring light cools, the room becomes the building. It is vacuum. The smell of lemons that aren't here. Marcus pushes the cart to the dark end and lifts the paper towel roll. Beneath it, the old hand wraps weight like a ritual. He doesn't touch them. He stands in the square instead and listens to how quiet sounds when it's earned. On his phone, he scrolls past the gym's stream, past a meme with a bucket, past comments that burn and then forget they were on fire. He opens his own account name that doesn't carry weight and types without hurrying. 3 rounds. After hours, taped square. Winner stays. Loser leaves Iron Forge for good. Waivers signed, keep it clean. Or keep teaching kids to lift their chins into a choke. He stares at the words until they look like work instead of noise. He hears the box fan in a small apartment and a laugh that lives there. He hears a chain's small hymn. He posts, algorithms have appetites. The challenge pings and propagates. A local forum slaps odds on it, as if morality can be parlayed. Someone prints fake tickets as a joke. Someone else buys them, because paper feels safer than links. The comment floods. Lion emojis. Armchairs. Men sharpening each other on dull knives. Derek's phone becomes a hive. Investor texts, don't touch it. The comments call him a coward with brand-safe spelling. He looks at his reflection, hikes his chin, and types anyway. Friday, 9 p.m. Keep it clean. By morning, the square is a promise heavier than tape. It hums in the room Even when the lights are off, Tyler sets an alarm. 45 water timer. He watches the digits confirm and feels something in his chest confirm too. Sarah prints 2 waivers on heavy stock and a 1-page incident protocol she wrote at a different job for a different emergency. She adds a line at the bottom. Referee S. Martinez signs it with a small pen flourish and puts it in the top drawer in a folder labeled When, Not If. The investor comes in mid-afternoon to count heads through glass. We need control, he tells Derek as they walk the empty row of dumbbells like a set tour. No surprises. He smiles at Sarah like a man requesting coffee from a stranger's kitchen. Risk memo. By Monday, she says. With nouns. Outside. The parking lot shimmers. Inside. Time turns to rope. You can feel between your hands. Hours climb and lean. Marcus asks the square to hold. It does. At home, Maya finds the post between a lab and lunch. She doesn't message him. She sets up her phone on 2 textbooks and films her hands instead, rapping slow and exact. Thumb loop. Knuckles flat. Cross. Wrist. If someone tries to take your air, she says into a mic clipped to a hoodie, don't give it away. She demonstrates peeling a wrist from her throat with a small motion that makes room for breath to return. She posts, it travels sideways the way good gossip does. A firefighter messages, showing this at roll call. A social worker asks to use it in a class. She replies, yes, and stay safe, then puts her phone face down because gratitude can drown you if you stare too long. Night before, the gym breathes like a sleeping animal. Rivera unlocks the back early, and the 2 of them run quiet reps, footprints that don't scuff, angles you can step into with your eyes shut. No heavy bag. Rivera says, ask the canvas questions, save the answers. End clean, Marcus answers. He double knots the chain with a habit's grace and pretends it changes fate. Friday comes with a sky like bruised peach and air that sticks. The blue tape corners are fresh. Sarah lifted and relayed them with the care she usually reserves for legal names. She places the first aid kit near the square, unlocks it, locks it again. She's already counted the ice. Phones away. She tells the dozen who came to film a sermon. A couple pretend not to hear. She hears anyway. If I see a lens, I see the door. Waivers are not capes. Derek arrives late enough to seem busy, early enough to rehearse calm. Keep it clean, he says to no one, a microphone in his head that never powers down. He loosens his shoulders in profile and lets the ring light find him, even though it isn't on. Tyler stands at the edge, with a stopwatch looped on a lanyard, palms dry on purpose. He looks at Marcus once, not a question, a vote. Marcus's nod is small and spends no money. The hour clicks toward its shape, AC hum, rubber's faint chemical breath, chain that doesn't move, because it already did its story work. Sarah reads the waivers once more, scans the names, notes who writes their full first, and who uses initials to pretend they'll be fine. At 9:02, the room tilts inward like a lens. Marcus steps through the service door, black trunks plain, old wraps invisible, under skin. He doesn't look for cameras, he looks for exits. Derek steps into the square as if a red carpet lives under the tape. Touch gloves. Sarah says. He tilts his chin for an angle. Marcus touches exactly what the rule asks, and nothing else. 3 rounds, Sarah announces, voice carrying without strain. She plants her feet where the 2 lines of tape cross. Her eyes meet Marcus's for the briefest beat. Breathe. The timer blinks red numbers that don't care about men. Tyler's thumb hovers over start, finds it, commits. A hush falls that isn't reverence, It's physics air collecting where impact plans to go. Fight, Sarah says. They move. Derek charges like a man paying off a narrative with interest. An overhand whistles and misses by a breath. Cameras gasp and forget they're off. Marcus watches the floor, not the man, and lets the mat tell him where weight lives tonight. I up tests. I up right center line. A jab pencils the spot. The future will arrive. The chain above the nearest bag gives a single dry click and then holds every step. The square shrinks and clarifies every breath. The room learns a new language. Shoes whispering, ribs answering, restraint making a sound. Nobody taught it. The logo backdrop leans against the cage and pretends not to watch. Somewhere a notification pings on a phone that isn't supposed to be out. Nobody flinches. The box holds. The night tightens to a bright thread, and with each small economy parry down, angle off, hands home, something shifts from spectacle to proof. The city goes on outside. Sprinklers and freeway and a flag's chain clanking in hot wind. In here, rules carry weight. Tape borders mean something again. And the comment that started as noise has turned into a room with a door that only opens one way, through. The first punch misses by inches and takes some of the heat with it. Air lifts off skin like steam. The square shrinks to a breath. Derek comes on hard, shoulders loud, trying to turn momentum into law. He slings an overhand meant for thumbnail's glove, humming past Marcus's ear with enough wind to sting. Phones in pockets tighten, hands tighten. The room tilts. Marcus watches the floor, not the man, and lets the mat tell him where weight wants to live tonight. Hands home. Rivera calls small voice. Big gravity. Marcus gives them 3 taps that look like neat handwriting. Yup, fins range, wakes nerve. Jab writes the center line. Jab pinpricks a detail where the future will arrive. Derek blinks fast. He slings again, chin floating like a lantern in a gust. The chain over the nearest bag answers with one dry tick and holds. Tyler stands with his thumb on the timer and his heart on the wrong side of time. He feels the square, teaching him the language his body never learned in class. Sarah moves 2 steps clockwise with the first aid kit, stance angled between duty and danger, counting distances only she sees. Derek tries to bully Angle into submission. He stamp plants his lead foot like a deed, swings wide enough to owe back taxes. Marcus steps off a half shoe and places a glove on ribs not to hurt. To ask a question. Here, the answer is a grunt. Pride wants to translate it as triumph. Come on. Derek spits. Fight. I am, Marcus says, and it lands soft, like water saying river. He's subtracting, not adding, a parry that doesn't travel, a pivot that spends less than it looked. The room's temperature nudges up a notch, bristling, not hot. Fans forget their job. Rubber breathes ammonia. Someone near the mirror whispers, "Oh," and can't say why. Derek fakes low, throws high, an algorithm's favorite lie. Marcus watches hip, not glove. He answers with 2 and a small piece of geometry. Cross grazes. Hook shapes, air, nothing heavy. The point, not pain but proof. Sound changes in the room from hunting for highlights to listening for mistakes. Derek's heels squeak. Marcus's shoes whisper. The square gets smaller and clearer. 30. Sarah calls, palm circling. The timer beeps like a tired bird. Derek lung his forehead first. Ego second. Gasping at a narrative that won't pay out, Marcus doesn't punish him. He turns him and shelves a glove against sternum for a breath. Permission to stop written in pressure. Restraint registers. It travels strangely through all the unblinking eyes there, and not there like a kindness caught at the edge of frame. Time. Sarah says. Voice that turns noise into room. Break is a minute thin as paper. Derek paces in a tight square and forgets to breathe. Tyler offers water. Gets a glare. He'll remember longer than he wants to. Rivera leans on tape and speaks to Marcus like you speak to a metronome. Small holes. He says, let him pour. Round 2 starts balanced. Derek jabs a jab he doesn't believe in. Marcus parries down. Makes eye contact long enough to say, stop lying without a word. Then hangs a hook on the body where ribs meet history. The hit doesn't look like much. It lands like rent. Derek adjusts badly. His base widens, chin floats higher. He looks like a statue arguing with its pedestal. Marcus slides to the open side and picks a careful combination, jab to set, cross to confirm, hook to suggest. He doesn't chase. He invites mistakes, watches them RSVP. Phones rise higher, comments silent, smothered bloom in pockets like weeds. Clinic surfaces in a dozen private brains all at once. Sarah sees posture change on faces. Comprehension is a hush that travels like weather. On the edge, Tyler feels his own chin tuck. Hands return home of their own accord. His body is learning to be a better friend to his throat. Derek slings a right so hard it drags him over his own front foot. Marcus meets shoulder to shoulder for a half breath, warm and human, and whispers a single word the room doesn't hear. Chin. The uppercut that follows is modest, built like a hin, arriving without announcement. Spit draws a thin thread on the mat. Hands up. Tyler mutters at a volume meant for prayer. He watches the square redraw the world's borders. He watches restraint do violence to violence. The last 10 seconds of the round stretch the way rubber does before it learns how far is safe. Marcus taps a jab that is mostly a metronome. Here is time. He steps off and lets Derek punch air's grammar. Air forgives. Tape does not. Time. Sarah says. She moves between them with the willingness of someone who has already decided where the stray will land if it lands. The applause sounds like theater, discovering its church somewhere outside. Sprinklers stitch the night. A freeway sighs. A flag chain clanks against a pole and gets over itself. Inside the taped blue square, breath becomes the only currency that spends. Round 3 should be formality. Pride disobeys math. End him. A voice hisses near the mirror. It hits Derek's ear and flips a switch. He rushes like a man buying back his narrative with a check that will bounce. He throws himself over his front foot so hard. His heel tries to catch up and fails. Jaw first, memory second, regret third. Marcus sees it a beat early. He doesn't wind, he doesn't perform. He rotates 6 inches on a hinge. He's oiled for 20 years. The left travels a short road and arrives on time. Sound changes again. Not big, deep bad into ripe fruit under a quiet sky. After that, everything happens inside frame. A body obeying gravity without dignity. Gloves splayed in a posture that never looks like sleep. Blue tape holding more history than adhesive was promised. Marcus is already dropping to one knee. He shelves his right, slides the left under the jaw, turns the head to open an airway. The way the old men taught when cameras were expensive. Breathe, he says. Breathe. He watches the mouth guard. Lips. The place panic hides behind teeth. He counts without letting numbers show in his face. Sarah kneels. Get open. Pulse. She says, like a door she expects to find. Got it. Her hands hover a surgeon waiting to choose. She doesn't touch until touching helps. Derek climbs back to the surface. Confusion first. Anger looking for a host next. humiliation coming up the stairwell like bad news. He tries to sit. His balance disagrees. "I'm fine," he croaks. The liturgy of men who just lost an argument with physics. "Stay," Marcus says, 2 fingers on sternum, just long enough to be understood and not long enough to humiliate. He stands without theater, steps back, makes space around a person. Silence is wet cement for one beat, everything fresh and setting. Then it breaks. The shuffle of feet, the breath of a dozen pockets waking, the rustle of conclusions trying to put on their shoes. The chain over the bag hums low, brass in bone, ongles scramble. One lens catches hand, leaving shoulder, and edits mercy out. Another golds, the fall like a miracle, props the footwork that made it inevitable. A third finds Sarah's mouth on the word time, and builds justice into a 2-second reel. None of them catch Tyler's nod, small, grateful, the grammar new and still correct. Rivera slides an ice pack inside a towel. "Head up," he says, mouth guard out. He doesn't say you were wrong. Biology is delivering that lecture fine. Sarah raises both arms and doesn't smile. "It's over," she says, and the word becomes shelter. She checks the waivers like talismans, checks the clock like faith. The square exhales. Money changes pockets by the water cooler. Shame looks for somewhere to squat. The logo backdrop leans and pretends it saw none of this. Tyler waits until noise bleeds out the door. He steps into the square and stops 2 feet from the man who just taught his nerves to behave. "How did you—" "Not—" His hands open on the last word, the question bigger than punch. "It's part of it," Marcus says. He flexes his left tendons like clean lines under skin and winces at a ghost. "Control's the fight you bring with you." "Teach me," Tula says, almost ashamed to need. "When you're ready," Marcus answers. The promise isn't leverage, it's a door. Sarah snaps the kit shut. "I'll log the incident," she says, because paper keeps rooms honest. She glances at the big glass where reflections linger like witnesses that don't get called. Back door. Marcus rolls the old wraps off slow, smoothing them flat with his thumb. They go under the paper towels, because ritual matters, even when nothing is hiding anymore. Sweat cools to honesty on his shoulders. He leaves through cinder block and service light, where the night doesn't know his name well enough to shout it. The hallway hums at a frequency just under comfort. Fluorescents buzz. Somewhere a timer blinks 9:41 and refuses to be impressed. Rivera meets him by the service door like a man clocking out of the same shift. "Clinic," he says, then shakes his head at his own cliché. "You ended a story and started one. Everyone's always starting another." Marcus says. They step into heat that hasn't learned night. Tar, a hint of rain that didn't happen. The metal complaint of a dumpster lid. Settling. Behind them, the tape holds chain rests. Phones in vent. Ahead of them, quiet waits like a job. Inside the gym, the square sits there the way a good lie sits tidy. Plausible. Photogenic. The chain gives one last shiver and decides to be silent. On 3 different screens across the city, the same clip loops to the moment before the left lands and cuts away to words that don't know what they've missed. Saturday cracks open thin and bright. A square of sun laid like a verdict on the apartment carpet. The AC coughs. The fridge clicks. Somewhere below, a kid thunders across laminate like a drumline with no parade. Marcus pours coffee that tastes like burnt toast and pennies and doesn't turn on the TV. He doesn't need to. The phone on the counter pulses screen down like a small animal trying not to breathe loud. Across town, a ring light turns a kitchen island into a studio. The jaw brace is color matched to sympathy. The voice is contrition measured by a metronome only an agent can hear. I tried to help, Derek tells the anchor, who nods on delay. Sometimes a man carries anger he doesn't understand. I forgive him. The clip lands. Duplicates. Sheds context like an old skin. Someone overlays strings. Someone else adds captions big enough to smother nuance. By lunch, a Chiron learns a new favorite phrase: workplace violence. Around 6, the knock comes. 3 beats. Professional. Not a negotiation, just the sound of paperwork arriving. Marcus opens to uniforms beaded with heat, and a sergeant who reads rights like a bedtime story the city doesn't let him forget. Anse visible, palms low, fingers loose. Yes, Seer, he says to names, to steps, to the shape the morning is about to take. Can I tell my daughter? You can, the sergeant says. Make it quick for her sake. Maya stands in her doorway, in a hoodie that's swallowed by a night that hasn't left yet. Sleep creases, phone already in her hand. She looks at the cuffs, the way some people look at magic tricks trying to catch the cheap hinge. I'll follow, she says, voice flat and sharp. I'll be right there. The hallway smells like last night's onions and old dust. Doors crack. Neighbors become silhouettes with eyebrow. Vinyl in the cruiser holds heat like a grudge. Dispatch sings distances and codes. The city passes in rectangles. Scrub earth. Asphalt. A sliver of sky. Booking is fluorescence and laminate. Ink. Nitrile. A printer that chews, thinks, decides. Shoes. Belt. Keys into a shallow tray. A camera that clicks like it's bored. Any injuries? No. Allergies. He thinks of lemons and mop water and says no, because none of this is about citrus. They put him in a room where a clock lies. The vent breathes a bleach cold that lives behind the tongue. He counts 4 in, holds 4, sends 6 out, and keeps sending until the door opens on a woman in a bun that started the day with ambitions. She sets a stack of files down and sticks out a hand. I'm Jennifer Walsh, she says, and shakes like time is expensive. Public defender. I've got an arraignment calendar that thinks it's a joke. So give me clean sentences and no speeches. Yes, ma'am. They want felony aggravated assault. She flips. They will sell disparity of force until someone buys it. Best path, context, and restraint. I need originals, not memes, messages, recordings, complaints, anything with a date that isn't yesterday. A Penhovers. Names. Rivera. Sarah at the desk. A beat. My daughter might have something. Walsh drags a neat line under each. Good. Chain of custody is not a metaphor to me. Do not contact the complainant. Do not post. Do not give interviews to microphones hiding under hair. If a camera points at you, look at the wall behind it and call me. She slides a card across the table. Bail in 72. We'll try for O.R. He nods once. It's a movement so small it could be mistaken for breath. On a bus bench outside the building, Maya sits with a water bottle. She forgets to drink, and a folder like a shield. Heat pours itself across concrete and waits for a believer. Lawyers come and go with case faces. She opens her phone, considers recording a rant, and instead films her hands in close-up, wrapping a pair of practice gloves on the kitchen table at home. Thumb loop, knuckles flat, cross, wrist. If someone takes your air, she says to the mic, you don't give it away. She posts without hashtags, without a face. The first heart is a friend. The 10th is a stranger. A comment from a woman in Glendale, showing my daughter now. Back at the gym, Sarah unlocks her file cabinet and sets papers out like a chapel laying out sacrament. Dates, times, exact phrases in neat hand. Quotes that look ridiculous until you remember who says them. She slides a thumb drive into the staff PC, mirrors folders. She's been mirroring on Fridays for months. Front desk cam clips, locker hallway audio, incident log Stone Williams. She copies to a clean drive, writes hash values with an actual pen on actual paper, because paper behaves better than metadata when the temperature rises. She tucks the sheet in an envelope addressed to herself, walks to the blue mailbox on the corner, and lets the clunk inside do the thing applause never does. Witness: Rivera sits at his kitchen table with his phone plugged into a charger that believes in miracles. He cues a voice memo, listens to 12 seconds, stops, scrubs back, listens again, not for words, for the air around them. AC hiss, rubber squeak, that faint high ping of chain on hook that says you didn't fake this in a software demo. He exports to a clean drive, prints, device info, and SHA-256 writes them longhand like a vow. He texts Walsh, originals preserved, chain documented, will bring no send. She replies, Faraday bag waiting. He grabs keys. He doesn't need to jingle, and a jacket that won't get cold. In a glazed office framed by motivational verbs, the investor rehearses a sentence about brand integrity in a mirror that flattens regret. He emails a lawyer whose tie has the charisma of a warning label. The subject line reads, triage. He never uses the word truth. He uses the word exposure 4 times. News vans find the apartment complex, the way vultures find thermals. A camera operator wipes a lens with the hem of a station polo. The reporter powders cheekbones in a van window and practices switching from warm to concern. We'll do it live, the producer says, because tape is for people who can plan. Maya watches through blinds and decides not to give anyone a face they can frame their headline with. Instead, she records a second clip. No commentary, just a slow demonstration of peeling a wrist off a throat. She pins 3 words in white text. Keep your breath. A fire department account shares it with a caption that reads, showing at roll call. A social worker in Mesa asks if she can use it in class. Maya replies to both with a heart and a please do. By evening, a process server in cuffed khakis hands Sarah a letter from compliance, offering a new title that pays the same and comes with a muzzle. She hole punches it, slides it behind a tab labeled threats, and shuts the binder like a mouth at a kitchen island turned confessional. Derek's lawyer drafts a civil complaint as if pain is a spreadsheet. Columns for medical, columns for emotional distress. A line item called reputation that has no unit of measure. We'll get an injunction on any lobby tapes, he says, prejudicial. He pronounces it like magic. Derek touches the brace, rehearses sincerity, scrolls through a comment section that will love him until it doesn't. Night comes heavy and clingy. In county, the cell is a shoebox with a loud vent. Concrete pretends to be bed. Marcus focuses on a bolt in the cinderblock flat. Dull, honest until his breath lays down beside it. 4 in, hold. 6 out. A snore saws 2 bunks down. A man in the corner talks in a dream. A CO's keys whisper at the door and move on. Across Phoenix, small screens glow like fish at depth. Clips multiply. Anglais Lee. Then, Lee better. One isolates a fall and smiles at the physics. Another sells mercy as a glitch. None record the quiet after the punch where hands decide not to be weapons. The algorithm opens its mouth and eats the day. It burps out merchandise. Walsh drives back from a strip mall notarization with Rivera's phone zipped inside a bag that kills signals. The paralegal waits with a chain of custody form and a Sharpie that works on the first try. Small grace. They clone. They compute checksum. They match numbers like you. Match faces in a crowd. And hope you're not wrong. When the hashes line up, she doesn't smile. She writes, verified, and circles it twice. The apartment is cooler by midnight. Maya watches her second clip. Find people who needed it in cities she's never seen. Flagstaff, El Paso, some place where the comments fill with my sister and my kid. She prints out the nicest one because printers also deserve good days. She tapes it to the fridge beside a dog-eared scholarship sheet. The sticky note above the microwave clock says, keep your breath. She adds a period. It looks heavier with punctuation. Down on the main road, a flag chain rings once in the wind and stops like it heard itself showing off. The city breathes heat back into the sky. Somewhere, a freight train finds its long voice and pulls it through the dark. The sound carries low and sure. Couplers talking gravity, steel, answering steel. In the empty gym, the heavy bag hangs quiet. Canvas cooled, the carabiner's small mouth resting in its groove. There's a click in the building's bones as AC cycles, then nothing, not absence, rest. By dawn, an email pings the investor's phone titled, Concerns. Insurance asks about incident reporting, about employee morale, about exposures with tails. He replies with phrases like proactive posture and narrative management, and CC's a PR firm that charges extra for sincerity. Sun burns the day open. In holding, Marcus sits on the edge of a slab and wraps his hands in air because that's all he owns. A ritual for bone, a rehearsal for not breaking. 4 in, 4 hold, 6 out. He closes his eyes and finds the sound of chain in the back of his mind and lets it hum. A low, stubborn note that knows the difference between weight and pressure. He keeps breathing until breath is a place, not a task. He keeps it like a promise nobody else can take. The courtroom smelled like paper and cooled dust, as if the air itself had been filed. Light fell in strict rectangles across varnished benches. A wall clock ticked in a voice that wanted to be obeyed. Marcus sat at counsel table with his hands flat and uninteresting. The way Walsh had taught him, her legal pad was a battlefield arranged to look like a picnic tabs. Arrows. 3 words underlined twice. Chain. Context. Restraint. The clerk called the case. Wood creaked. Bodies rose. Judge Hawkins took the bench without extra ceremony. Black robe. Gray hair. A gaze that ironed wrinkles out of excuses. Good morning, she said, and the room decided it was. Kellerman stood for the state Navy suit. Haircut you could measure with a ruler. A smile that pretended to apologize for what paperwork requires. Your Honor, the recordings the defense intends to offer were made without consent in a private facility. Highly prejudicial. We move to exclude under the rules. Foundation first, Hawkins said. She turned to Walsh. Show me the spine. If it holds, it walks. Walsh rose. A line drawn true. The defense calls Luis Rivera. Rivera took the stand in his one good jacket. Cuffs a hair short like honest sleeves. He swore in, sat, folded his hands on the rail as if it were a rope in a ring. Name. Occupation, Walsh said. Luis Rivera. Coach. On April 10th, did you make an audio recording inside the lobby of Iron Forge Academy? Yes. On what device? My iPhone. 12 Pro. Voice memos. Where was it? Jacket pocket. Walsh slid a clear pouch to the bailiff. Your Honor, we've preserved the original device in a Faraday bag. We will authenticate with device information and hash values at first export. Kellerman rose an inch. Hash values are not a sacrament. That's why the phone is here, Walsh said. Mr. Rivera, Please unlock. Play the first 30 seconds. Rivera angled the mic toward the speaker. The courtroom filled with a familiar acoustic, the thin hiss of AC, a rubber squeak, a faint metal ping like chain on hook. Then a voice, zirp, over grit, unmistakable even through the phone's small throat. I'm gonna break that boy down until he quits or does something stupid. A second voice quiete. Tired of certain kinds of men, that's not coaching. A small laugh. It's branding. Silence does different work in court. This one wrote things down. Do you recognize those voices? Walsh asked. Yes. Name them. Derek Stone. Me. Did you alter the file? No. Where did it go after you hit stop? Phone to iCloud. Exported to my desktop. Ms. Walsh copied under my supervision. We captured the checksum then. Walsh held up a printout like a tag from a morgue. Your Honor, Defense Exhibit A. Device info. File path. Chat 206 at first export. We can reproduce the value now. Hawkins glanced at the paper, then at Rivera, then at the bagged phone on the evidence cart. We won't turn this into a seminar, she said, but I want the numbers to agree with themselves. They did. The clerk read them out. Hexadecimal like a hymn. No one quite knew, and matched them back to the sheet. Hawkins made a note. Kellerman approached, voice smooth as wax. Mr. Rivera, you recorded a man without telling him. Yes. In a gym not open to the public, the lobby's open to members. Rivera said. Doors unlocked. Music on. People talking. Convenient. Noisy. Rivera said, your dislike of Mr. Stone, does that help your memory? It helps me keep a log. Rivera said, it doesn't help me fake a chain ping. A few smiles skated the gallery and hid nothing further. Kellerman said, saving powder. Walsh called Sarah next. She walked to the stand with a manila envelope hugged to her ribs. Posture, in that specific category, front desk endurance, with a spine you don't see until somebody leans on it. State your name and job. Sara Martinez, front desk manager. You keep records. I keep sleep, she said, then corrected herself. Yes, complaint logs, incident notes, copies of the schedule when it grew teeth. Walsh laid thin stacks on the lead. Exhibits B through H. Contemporaneous note. Theme stamps. Mirrored files with hash value. We'll offer as business records kept in the ordinary course. Kellerman stood to stink it up. Ordinary course. You mean your private diary? I mean the thing you look at when somebody says, that never happened. Sarah said. She didn't look at him. She looked at Hawkins like the judge would appreciate precise nouns. Ms. Martinez, Walsh said, why did you mail copies to yourself? Because email gets lost when it's inconvenient, she said. The postmark can't be coached. They played one hallway clip, just sound, footsteps, the wheeze of an old printer, and Derek telling someone to schedule emergency cleans during sparring because humility has to be taught. The audio was tinny and yet heavy. Kellerman tried the expected angles. You're disgruntled. I'm employed. You hate my client. I hate wasted potential, she said, and met nobody's eyes when she said it, which is how truth travels best. Hawkins ruled without flourish. The recording of Mr. Stone's own statements is admissible as a party admission. Assuming you can replicate this foundation at trial, the log qualifies as a business record. The court will not permit a carnival of comments or a parade of memes. Social media created by Mr. Stone may be used if properly authenticated. We will try this case here, not in the gutter behind the internet. She looked over her glasses, teacher mode. Everyone understand? Yes, Your Honor, came in stereo. Bail next. Walsh stacked facts like bricks. Steady employment. Community ties. No record. surrendered peacefully. Daughter in school. He's not running, she said. He's been standing still in front of trouble for months. Kellerman put on his concerned face. Serious offense. Trained hands. Public safety. Public safety includes telling the truth about power, Walsh said, then let it drop before the judge had to bat it away. Hawkins set her pen down. A soft sound with teeth. Own recognizance with conditions. No contact except through counsel. No social media commentary. Remain in the county. Obey the law. Mr. Williams leaves this building on his own feet. A little heat left the room. Not relief temperature. They took 10. The hallway outside tasted like old coffee and tile cleaner. Walsh leaned her shoulder to marble and closed her eyes for exactly 2 breaths, then opened them and handed Marcus a single piece of advice, wrapped as a joke. Don't start a podcast, she said. He won't, he said. Rivera joined them with 2 paper cups from a machine that dispensed humility. You did fine, he told Marcus. He sat still. Marcus said, harder than it looks. Rivera said. Sarah approached, envelope tucked under her arm like a baby. She didn't plan to feed to wolves. They offered me a new title, she said. Same money. More silence. You taking it? Walsh asked. I already mailed myself, Sarah said, tapping the envelope. The future too, just in case. When court resumed, Kellerman tried to stuff the genie back into the statute. We renew our objection to the so-called lobby recordings. The prejudice is not unfair, Hawkins said, motion denied. She looked, for the first time, straight at Marcus. Not long. Enough. Sir, context cuts both ways. So does restraint. Keep both where you can reach them. Yes, Your Honor. The gavel didn't fall because she didn't need one. They adjourned into afternoon light that turned the courthouse steps into theater. Reporters clustered like gulls around fries. Walsh moved them through with the grace of a woman who's learned that no is a complete sentence. On the plaza, a flag chain clanked against its pole. One bright ping swallowed by heat. Buses sighed. A man argued into a phone about invoices. Ordinary noise resumed jurisdiction. Maya waited at the curb with 2 waters and a posture that had learned when to take up space. She handed him a bottle and didn't speak until the first swallow was done. How'd it? She started. We're still in the right building, he said. She exhaled, shoulders lowering a fraction. Okay. Walsh pressed a folded receipt into his palm. A copy of the chain of custody page, the hex string underlined. This is the spine, she said. Eat. Sleep. Tomorrow we pull muscles you didn't know law had. Rivera raised his cup like a bad toast. To boring paperwork, he said. May it save lives. Sarah offered a thin smile that wasn't for cameras. Paper remembers, she said, more to herself than anyone else. They crossed the plaza together, a small, unspectacular knot of people carrying a file's worth of gravity. The sun bounced off the glass like a bright lie. The city kept moving around them, disinterested, which is how cities forgive. Somewhere, a train dragged its long metal voice across town, couplers clanking, steel speaking fluent consequence. In Marcus' chest, breath counted itself 4 in. Hold. 6 out, stitching calm into a day that wanted fray. He kept that rhythm. He kept it like a key. Jury assembly smelled like pencil shavings and vending machine coffee. Thin caffeine. Thick nerves. Fluorescent bars hummed a tired chord. The wall clock clicked like a metronome that had opinions. Marcus sat near a pillar where the AC coughed and found the rhythm he trusted 4 in. Hold. 6 out breath. Stitching the morning into something he could wear. Walsh skimmed a printout, the names underlined in 3 colors that made a private map only she could read. Teachers, Nurses, anyone who's had to de-escalate a hallway, she murmured, eyes not leaving the page. People who respect rules but know they fail. She lifted her gaze. Keep your face quiet. Jurors mistru streliev. He nodded. Quiet was a skill. They filed through security toward wood and light. The courtroom had that varnished stillness old rooms learn after decades of listening to people swear to tell the truth. Judge Hawkins took the bench with the same economy as always. No theater, just gravity. The projector screen glowed blank, a white door waiting to be opened. "Good morning," she said, and the room obeyed. The veneer slid into the box cardigan over school lanyard. A lineman with knuckles like river stones. A grad student whose knee bounced a private drum solo. A retiree in a jacket that had seen potlucks and funerals. A young mother with a tattoo half hidden under sleeve. The clerk swore them in. The bailiff shut the door with a soft hydraulic sigh that still sounded like final. Kellerman went first, his voice lacquered and pleasant. "This case is about responsibility," he said, letting the syllables sit on the rail. "Anyone believe trained hands should be held to a higher standard." 5 hands rose, 1 decisive, 4 cautious. He smiled like they'd proved his point. "Anyone think social media always lies?" Laughter dipped and swam. He wrote it. He didn't write anything down. Walsh stood with her notepad closed. "Anyone here ever talk a situation down in a hallway? Hospital? School? Job site? Hands teacher? Nurse?" Linemen rose like they had weight. "Anyone ever have a boss who never apologized?" Real laughter this time. The kind that arrives with recognition. She didn't smile back. "Could you believe a person threw one punch and then stopped because that was enough?" Eyes tracked her, not hands. She watched the thinking. 2 were excused for cause. 1 couldn't stop nodding at everything Kellerman said. 1 hated fighting on principle and wanted to fight about it. They traded peremptories like chess, and ended with a mosaic: cardigan, lineman, grad student, retiree, young mother, a dental hygienist who carried herself like a metronome, a FedEx driver, a community college librarian, an HVAC tech, a florist with careful hair, a barista with a sleeve of ink that looked like a storm, and the teacher who had held eye contact with the word enough. Hawkins delivered the guardrails. "Evidence comes from the stand," she said, "not from feeds or feelings. Openings are maps, not destination." She let the silence harden. "Counsel." Kellerman drew a line you could see from the street. "Training becomes duty. Duty becomes offense." The fence was crossed. "This is not about likability," he said. "It's about law." A professional of force used that force to knock out an amateur at his place of work. He could have stepped back. He didn't. He let the last word cool on wood. Walsh kept her hands still. "You will see a square tape and rules. You will hear words that are not coaching. You will watch a punch, and then you will watch restraint. The question is not if you liked what you saw online. The question is whether the law permits a person to end a fight without beginning another one." The state called first an EMT named Perez, with night shift eyes, and a voice that belonged in rooms where panic got taxed. He laid out vitals like inventory GCS, pulse, respiration, dilation, concise loss of consciousness. He said, "Airway patent on assessment. Could that punch have been lethal?" The prosecutor asked. "Could." Perez lifted a shoulder. "Streets dice roll. Based on what I saw, low probability." He stabilized airway. "Didn't pylon." Walsh didn't make him bleed. The man who threw the punch, what did he do after? Turned the head, opened the airway, kept people back, took direction. Next, Tyler hands too clean, bruise fading under one eye. He walked like the floor might change its mind. "You were there," the prosecutor said. Yes. What did you see? Tyler kept his gaze on the poster board, where a blue tape square was printed like a prayer rug. They touched gloves. He rushed. The other guy didn't. He kept things neat. How hard was the punch? Tyler's hands opened on the rail, palms up, as if the truth were a small animal he didn't want to spook. It was clean, like a mechanic stopping at the click. Kellerman stood with softness over steel. You admire the defendant. I respect him, Tyler said. Not the question. I don't know him. Tyler answered, jaw tight. You dislike Mr. Stone. Sometimes I dislike how he coaches. He didn't look at anyone when he said it. You cornered for him that night. He needed water, Tyler said, and sounded surprised at his own honesty. Sarah followed, paper straight as a blade. Walsh walked her through job title, duties, complaint log. That wasn't a diary. Mirroring files on Fridays, because pens behave when power doesn't. She kept her voice unheeded. I documented because memory gets bullied, she said. Biased, Kellerman asked. Organized, she said. Out to get my client. I'm out to sleep, she said. And the young mother on the panel nodded once like amen. A neurologist arrived with slides and arrows. Rotational acceleration. Diffuse injury. Walsh didn't pick a fight she didn't need. Control matters. Yes. Restraint reduces risk. Yes. One precise strike can be less destructive than 3 messy ones. He said it in a way that made the grad student stop punting his knee. During the break, the hallway sounded like marble. Remembering footsteps. Tyler stared at a brass sconce that wasn't on. Derek materialized beside him like a pop-up ad brace. Tight smile. You were soft, he said under his breath. Don't forget who taped your wrists. You taught me wrong, Tyler said. Kid. Chin up. Arms wide. I almost slept because of you. We play to strengths. You play to cameras, Tyler said, and flinched at his own bravery. Walsh coasted by, her presence a firebreak. No talking to parties, she said mildly, offering him an exit he took with gratitude. Afternoon brought Derek to the stand. He wore contrition like a suit that fit last month. The prosecutor kept him in the narrative he liked. Workplace. Fear. An attempt to give a man pride. On cross, Walsh asked for nouns. You captioned a video. Know your place. Correct. About humility, he said. We lack it these days. You used the word boy on a post. I use that with everyone. On camera. To Mr. Harrison. Different relationships. Different languages. Would you teach defending a choke with the chin high? She asked, producing a foam head and a soft brace. He demonstrated something the lineman visibly winced at. The teacher wrote nothing for 5 full seconds, and when you said, break him down until he quits or does something stupid, that's humility. Locker room talk. Branding, she said, and let his recorded word hang in the rafters. Hawkins sent the jurors home with the standard spell against outside facts. Reporters flared at the doors like moths. Walsh body checked microphones with no thank yous that didn't bruise. Evening lay hot across the plaza. The flag's chain clanked once against the pole, bright metal against metal, and went still. Morning. Closings. Kellerman drew the neat arrow again. Training duty line crossed. A single punch can be lethal, he said. Hold professionals to the standard they chose. Walsh didn't pace. You saw restraint, she said. You heard plan. You watched someone end a fight inside the tape and not start another outside it. Hold him to his standard. It's higher than the one he was offered. Instructions read like road sign. Borden, elements, self-defense, mutual combat, credibility. You may consider bias, Hawkins said, and her eyes touched Derek for a heartbeat longer than neutral. The jury vanished behind a door that shut with a soft kiss. Waiting expanded to fill every inch of wood. The clock's second hand sounded smug. When the bailiff reappeared faster than the room expected, a murmur ran the pews like wind through dry grass. Before the foreperson could be sworn, Derek cracked. A mutter became volume. "You love him," he said. "Not to anyone in particular, and to everyone. You love the janitor story." He wanted that shot. He wanted to humiliate me. "Kellerman," Hawkins said, not loud and very final. "Control your client." The lawyer's hand touched forearm. Derek shook it off. He took a step toward the rail. The bailiff's hand twitched toward the belt and then didn't need to move because Walsh was already standing. Her voice, a level line. "Sit," she said to Derek, "to the day, to the part of the room that enjoys a fire." He sat. Pride swallowed a bad taste. The jurors filed back. The clerk took the sheet. The paper trembled a hair at the bottom edge. On the charge of felony aggravated assault, she read, "We find the defendant, Marcus Williams." A siren slid past outside. The flag chain hit the pole once metal on metal. A bright ping. "Not guilty." Noise wanted to erupt. Hawkins raised a palm and the room remembered its manners. Relief didn't yelp. It exhaled. A long, even ribbon. The young mother blinked hard. The lineman let his shoulders drop. The teacher's mouth softened, like she'd put down a bag. Kellerman recalibrated his face back to neutral. The investor in the second row smoothed his tie and did math with his eyes. Derek stared at Wood as if it could be reasoned with. "Members of the jury." "Thank you," Hawkins said, warmth tucked like a note in her voice. "You are released." Marcus stood the way he had sat, deliberate. Walsh's handshake landed like a teammate's clap. No spectacle. In the doorway, Maya pressed her forehead to his shoulder for one breath and then stepped back, eyes bright and steady. Microphones found the flat of Walsh's hand and stopped. Outside, the day burned clean. The plaza flag cracked. The chain approved. The courthouse steps threw light back at the sun. Somewhere a bus sighed, full of strangers, all headed somewhere else. Marcus felt the square of shade they occupied, like a small box drawn in chalk, a place to stand that wasn't a stage. He counted one breath, then another, and let the sound of a far train carry under everything, couplers clanking, steel speaking fluent consequence. While the city went on, not noticing, which felt, for once, like mercy. Night pressed against the apartment windows like warm hand. The city hummed, the far siren unfurling and tucking itself back in. Tires whispering on baked asphalt. An elevator cable thudding once per floor like a tired heartbeat. Maya sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open and no sound on. Blue light cut the room into planes. For Micah, a kipped mug, the bowl of keys that always sounded heavier than they were. Her phone pulsed on the laminate, cousins asking, classmates speculating, strangers advising in bulletproof sentences. She scrolled past the noise, the way swimmers pass kelp, careful not to get tangled. In the bedroom, her father's breath came steady, 4 and hold, 6 out, a private metronome that kept the walls from leaning. She opened the camera, framed only her forearms and the scuffed practice gloves. No filters, no music. Thumb loop, knuckles flat, cross, wrist. The cloth-kissed old tape burns and found its memory. "If someone tries to take your air," she said, voice low, mic close, "don't hand it over." She demonstrated the peel on a phantom wrist, small, exact, elegant as math. "Keep your breath." She posted and turned the phone face down before the first heart had time to arrive. Across town, Rivera sat with his television muted and his lamp off. The glow from his phone, turning the living room into a little aquarium. He cued a voice memo and listened to 12 seconds he already knew by heart. Not for words, those were carved. For air. For the AC hiss that made a gauzy backdrop, the rubber squeak that came at the same beat every time, the faint high ping of chain on hook. Details were scaffolding. Juries believed them. Boards did too. He dropped files onto a clean drive one by one, each copied with the patience of a man who had learned to trust nothing he couldn't hold. He printed a sheet and wrote, in careful block letters, date, device, file name, SHA 256. He read the numbers back. Slow, like Fow's. The ink sank and behaved. He slid the drive into a clear bag, pressed the zip, wrote the label with a black marker that squeaked. Midnight was a chalk line the city had already stepped over. The room smelled like hot plastic and coffee that never got poured. He texted Walsh, originals preserved. Chain documented. Garage, South Ramp, 7 a.m. Bring Faraday. If you're feeling fancy, 3 dots. Then, no heroics on my end. The reply came fast, like relief with a badge. Copy. Don't talk to anyone until you talk to me. He set the phone down. The apartment sighed. Somewhere. A freight train worried its couplers, metal speaking fluent gravity. He closed his eyes and heard the bag chain in the old gym ping once in memory, a small note that had started a storm. By morning, heat pushed through the parking garage like breath through cloth. Walsh waited in a slice of shadow under low concrete. No makeup, hair hauled into a knot that had stopped caring, a reed rope tucked under her arm like a shield. Rivera handed her the bag and a signed chain of custody form he'd pulled from a public template and made better. She slid the drive into a pouch that killed signals and balanced the document on the hood of her car long enough to sign her part. You make my job easy, she said. I make my sleep possible. He said, ça me difference. She answered and walked toward the courthouse elevator without looking back. At the copy shop, 2 blocks from the gym, Sarah stood at the counter with a stack of plain envelopes and a thumb drive the size of a secret. The printer behind her complained and then did its job. Toner gave the place a church smell. The clerk, barely old enough to shave, tried to be friendly. Big project. Memory, she said, neutral. I'm buying a better kind. Back at the front desk she no longer believed in. The investor waited with a smile that had been ironed. We value loyalty, he said, the words polished to a shine that made them slippery. We value discretion. He tapped the topmost envelope, then the drawer handle. We value teams. Sarah lifted a manila folder, the way a nurse lifts a chart. I value sleep, she said, and watched the smile die like a light losing power. When he leaned closer, she could smell cedar and something pressed and old. It's over, he said softly, like a weather report. Take the separation and a quiet 6 months. Everyone wins. That math never added up where I grew up, she said. But I can print you a receipt. She saw the moment he understood she wouldn't be bought and filed it next to risk in his eyes. On a bus bench outside the precinct, Maya's video started traveling in ways she hadn't planned and would never be able to map. A Phoenix firefighter messaged, showing this in roll call. A school counselor in Mesa. Can we use it for the 9th graders? A woman in a private chat where stories get told with cameras pointed at floors. Thank you, I needed this tonight. Maya wrote, stay safe with a red heart, and stuck a sticky note over the microwave clock that said, keep your breath, in black marker that bled a little. By lunch, the algorithm, hungry as weather, had opened its mouth. Clips proliferated, hands wrapping with care, daughters teaching mothers to frame their throats, gym mats that had never seen a fight hosting small clinics where nobody needed to win. Maya didn't chase the numbers. She scrolled with her thumb and stopped when the firefighter's hands looked like her father's deliberate, calm, slightly nicked. The investor's email arrived at Walsh's office with the subject line of a truce, mutually beneficial resolution. It attached a non-disclosure FAT with money that looked generous until you put it next to the next 5 years of a life. Walsh sent back a single line, "Serve filings to my office, not my witnesses." Then she printed the email, punched holes, and slid it into a binder under a tab she'd labeled "Threats" in blue ink when she was feeling less professional than usual. In the afternoon lull, a local reporter DM'd Maya like a person, not a logo. "Can we profile the hands, not the face?" She stared at the message and thought about the square of tape, about how a camera loves to lie with the truth it chooses. She typed, "Maybe later. Right now belongs to people who need it." Then she put the phone on airplane mode and poured rice into a pot with the practiced care of someone who knows patience is an ingredient. Derek stared at his own reflection in his kitchen window and tried to decide which face to wear. Contrition took practice. Defiance had always fit. He scrolled through a camera roll thick with angles that had once paid for rent and now looked like evidence. He typed a draft that started "I was wrong," then deleted it, then another that started "Lawyers won't let me," then deleted that too. He watched the knockdown in reverse until it looked like forgiveness. The refrigerator motor came on and held a note longer than was comfortable. Near dusk, Walsh sat at a narrow table with a paralegal and made a small city out of paper. Drives in labeled bags, exhibits with neon flags, a stack of declarations whose signatures looked tired. She listened to the lobby audio again with headphones on and eyes closed. The gym bloomed behind her eyelids, AC, rubber, chain. A landscape of sounds she could walk by memory. The paralegal circled a yellowed section in an older log where Derek had scheduled emergency cleans during sparring. Walsh circled the circle with her pen. "There," she said. "They always write themselves into the corner." The sun slid behind buildings and left heat behind like a toddler forgetting a toy. Marcus stood on the apartment balcony with his hands on the rail and watched the parking lot's fluorescence flatten cars into cardboard. His phone buzzed once and stopped. Another. He didn't look. The chain on the flag down by the street clanked once against the pole, metal on metal. A bright punctuation mark, and he found the old rhythm without trying. 4 in, hold. 6 out. Walls stayed vertical. On a sidewalk that still remembered the day, a woman in scrubs hunched over her phone and watched Maya's hands teach a peel in slow motion. She tried it on her own wrist and felt the shape of keeping air. She looked up at the sky and realized she hadn't looked up all week. Night hung itself carefully. Maya set 2 plates on the table and a bowl of avocado that was one day too brave. When her father sat, she slid her phone over. No numbers showed, only a dozen small squares from strangers. Wrists freed, chines down. The caption, "Keep your breath," written like a prayer in 8 different hands. He swiped once, then again, and set the phone face down with a small nod that said, "More than thank you." They ate. The fan chased heat in a circle. The building clicked and settled. Later, washing dishes, he stood in the kitchen's dull light with his hands in warm water and listened to the quiet that came after courtrooms and commentary. When he looked at the window, his reflection didn't startle. It just looked like a man who'd decided to be steady. The next morning, the gym's lobby smelled like toner and a future trying to be born. Sarah unlocked the front door and found a padded envelope leaning against the glass. No return address, the handwriting tight and careful. Inside, a copy of a commission's notice on letterhead and a post-it that read, "You didn't get this from me." Revocation was a word that didn't shout so much as remove options. She scanned, printed, logged, addressed, and stamped in a rhythm that bordered on prayer. Paper remembers. She said it out loud to the empty room and heard it fit. She called Rivera and left a voicemail with just 3 words. "Check your email." She called Walsh and said the longer sentence, "He had a license. Now he doesn't. Pending hearing." Walsh said, "Good," in a voice that didn't celebrate. Good is a floor you keep clean, not a party. By noon, a neighborhood rec center answered Rivera's email. The way parks answer kids, "Got mats, got team. If you've got a coach, we've got a room." He forwarded the message to 2 people, one whose name ended in public defender, one whose name he'd learned to write with respect, and stared at his screen until the words stopped being symbols and became permission. Afternoon lit the city a different color. Marcus and Rivera met in the rec center's quiet room, where basketball echo dies and fluorescent hum tries to act like peace. The mats were soft and honest. A roll of blue tape waited on a folding chair. Rivera peeled a strip, pressed it down, pulled a line, pressed again. A square grew in the center of the floor, corners crisp. They stood at the edge, like men at a shoreline. "Where do we start?" Rivera asked. "Feet," Marcus said. "Then air." Rivera nodded and found the chain on the bag they hadn't hung yet with his eyes. Like habit, it would get its hook, it would ping when it wanted. It would hold. Twilight slid against glass. The city coughed and kept moving. In apartments and break rooms and kitchens that smelled like detergent and exhaustion, people pressed thumbs to screens and watched a pair of hands show them where breath lived. On a clipboard in a desk drawer, under a tab called Threats, a copy of a letter waited its turn to matter. In a muted room, a man looked at his reflection until even he got bored of himself. At the rec center, the square sat blue tape on gray, modest and stubborn. Marcus stepped into it and felt the floor give back just enough. He lifted his hands and saw his daughter's sticky note in his mind, black marker bleeding slightly into yellow paper. "Keep your breath." He nodded once to the empty room, then to Rivera, then to himself, and began. Morning hit the courthouse like a white slab. Heat pushed off the stone steps. Security wands sang in bored little chirps. Marcus moved through it with a borrowed tie and the posture of a man carrying a full glass. Maya walked a fraction ahead, a paper cup of water in each hand. "Yafset." Walsh peeled out of a knot of clerks and led them down a corridor that smelled like dry paper and cooled metal. Inside, light fell in rectangles across varnished benches. The clock above the seal clicked like it had tenure. When the bailiff called the room up, then down, the ritual sanded the edges off nerves. 12 people took their places in the box. A drawer of mismatched tools asked to fix the same engine. Hawkins looked over the rims of her glasses and made the room feel less like theater. "The defense may call its next witness," she said. Walsh stood. Marcus Williams. He rose without drama. Right hand up, oath sliding into his chest and finding a seat. The mic added a half step of volume to a voice built for low rooms. "State your name for the record." Walsh said, "Marcus Dion William. Occupation, custodian." He said, "A beat. And I used to teach people how not to get hurt." She stepped aside so the jurors could hold him without mediation. "On the night in question, what did you agree to?" 3 rounds, no headhunting after the call. Ref in the square. "We signed, why take it?" He looked at the rail of the witness stand, the grain polished by other hands, Because it was already happening, this made a box around it. Describe your intent. End it clean, he said. Make sure everybody goes home. Walsh lifted a foam mannequin head and a padded neck brace from a bag. She set them on the ledge like two ideas. Walk us through what you did immediately after the strike. He cupped the foam jaw with 2 fingers and turned the head 1 precise inch. The movement was quiet as a breath. You open this space, he said. Gravity wants to close it. You don't let it. Why stop at 1 punch? Because more would be for me, he said. 1 was for the situation. A pencil stopped scratching in the second row. The lineman on the front bench tilted his head like a man checking plumb. Walsh nodded and let the quiet do some work. No further questions. Kellerman rose with the kind of smooth that cameras love. Mr. Williams, you could have stepped away. True, I could have stepped away at any point in my life. Marcus said, sometimes stepping means you get chased. You could have controlled him without striking. I controlled him with 1. You're trained, Kellerman said, soft as butter. That makes you more dangerous than the average man. To the lie that volume equals power, Marcus said. He didn't blink when the prosecutor's eyes sharpened. Kellerman let a smile show a canine. It felt good, knocking him down. It felt necessary, Marcus said. Then it felt like counting breaths. Nothing further, Kellerman said, because there was nowhere to go that wouldn't look like spite. Hawkins thanked the witness. The word thank you landing like a level on a countertop. Marcus returned to the table without looking left or right. Maya passed him a water with both hands like it was something holy. We'll take closings at 2, Hawkins said. Counsel will be punctual. She rapped nothing. The room understood anyway. The hallway took them with tile that ate footsteps. Walsh touched Marcus's elbow. A steer more than a comfort. Sandwich, she said. Salt. No interviews. Maya pressed a napkin-wrapped empanada into her father's palm and watched him take a first bite like he was making a decision and sticking to it. He chewed, swallowed, breathed. The day didn't tip. Reporters waited at the far end with mics like lilies. Walsh, body block. A polite wall in a cheap suit. No comments, she said, and made it sound like a blessing withheld. At 2, heat hammered the plaza. The flag outside cracked its chain once, twice. The bright ping threading through glass. The jurors filed in like people who'd been taught to stack patience. The clerk's voice tried for ceremony and landed on adequate. Kellerman went first. He spoke duty and training, drew a line from skill to obligation, with the confidence of a man who earns per arrow. A single punch can be lethal, he said. Palms open. We hold surgeons to standards. We hold pilots to standards. We must hold this trained man to his. He let the word trained glitter. He didn't look at the foam head on the evidence cart. Walsh stood last. She didn't pace. She didn't point. She rested her fingers on the rail of the jury box and looked down at the wood the way a carpenter checks what he's standing on. You saw a square, she said. You heard a man sell humiliation as coaching. You watched 1 punch, placed to end harm, followed by the only kind of power that has ever saved anyone restraint. She let the words sit. Hold Mr. Williams to his standard, she said. It's higher. Hawkins read the instructions like road signs you ignore at your own peril. Boredom, credibility, self-defense, mutual combat. Evidence lives in this room, she said, eyes grazing the gallery where 2 phones were barely hiding. Not on your screens, not in your cousin's group text. Then to the bailiff. Swear the officer. The 4-person accepted a file like it weighed something. 12 chairs scraped back. The door sealed with a soft kiss. Waiting settled in the room like a weather system. People toggled between stillness and useless movement. Walsh rolled her neck until one vertebra clicked, a promising click. Marcus fixed on a scratch in the defense table and realized his breath had shortened by mistake. He lengthened it on purpose. 4 in. Hold. 6 out. Hawkins noticed without looking like she did. 20 minutes stretched and snapped. 40 got heavy. The door opened. Then didn't it was a deputy with a note for the clerk. The door closed. Derek laughed one short syllable into his hand, a sound that tasted like tin. His lawyer put a palm on his sleeve. It didn't take, they love it, Derek whispered, not to anyone in particular, as if oxygen itself had chosen sides. They loved the janitor, the myth, Mr. Stone. Hawkins said without moving her face, "You will remain quiet." He stood anyway, pointing at a man who had refused to point back all month. "He wanted this," he said, voice rising. "He's been saving that punch since the day he mopped his way in." "Counsel," Hawkins said to Kellerman, "control your—" Walsh was up first, not loud, voiced the temperature of a hand on a stove knob. "Sit." For a second, just one, Derek looked like a man who had never been given that word by anyone who meant it. He sat. The brace on the seat beside him looked stranded. The door opened. 12 faces returned. The room inhaled and forgot how to exhale. The 4 persons stood with teacher posture, and a paper that trembled only at the bottom edge. "Madam 4-person," the clerk said, "we have a verdict." She passed the sheet. The clerk read, monotone, chipped at the edges. "On the charge of felony aggravated assault, we find the defendant, Marcus William." Outside, the flag chain clanged like a clean bell. A siren dopplered, and then thought better of it. "Not guilty." Silence dropped wrong, then broke into a spill of sound relief, wet laughter, the particular clap of one pair of hands that wanted to be a hug. Hawkins raised a palm an inch and returned the room to itself. "Order," she said, mild and absolute. Maya exhaled a breath that had been living low in her rib, pressing her shirt. She wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand like a fighter who doesn't audition for sympathy. Sarah's shoulders came down the last 2 inches they'd been holding. Rivera closed his eyes and let them stay closed for a count, then opened them because dignity is a discipline. Kellerman smoothed his tie into neutrality. The investor 2 rows back, a perfect knot, and the emptiest expression checked his phone. His future had already left this room and was waiting in an email with bullet points. Derek stared at the table edge like Wood could apologize. He didn't stand. He didn't clap. He pressed his thumb into the soft foam of the brace until it dented and held. "Members of the jury," Hawkins said, warmth tucked so deep it barely showed. "The court thanks you." She turned to counsel. "Anything further?" Walsh stood. "No, Your Honor." "Mr. William," Hawkins said, and for the first time, the robe sounded like corduroy instead of armor. "You're excused." He stood right, not fast, shook Walsh's hand like co-workers at the end of a shift that mattered, then found Maya in the doorway. They folded into each other without spectacle. The hallway sucked them out with everybody else, voices stacking like chairs. In the bright outside, light slapped. The plaza flag snapped and recovered. Microphones did their reaching. Walsh caught one on the palm and bent it away with a smile that killed the battery. "No statements today," she said. "We're busy going home." They crossed the steps. The bus at the curb exhaled and led on a woman with a lunchbox and legs that had carried too many double shifts. She glanced at Marcus because the city had made him a headline for a week, then looked away because the city teaches you to mind your own survival. Maya pressed a cup into his hand. He drank. Plastic flexed under his grip. A small, satisfying surrender. Back inside, a deputy, unlocked an evidence closet, and slid a poster board into storage. A blue taped square, printed big enough to fill a wall. In another office, a clerk stamped a file with the kind of thump that ends one thing and starts three others. Down the hall, the investor drafted a message with the words, "Transition plan and optics, and nobody's fault," then erased nobody's. On the courthouse bench, Derek sat alone with the brace in his lap. The smile he'd practiced for years had nowhere to land. He looked up. Through the glass, he could see the flagpole's chain jump in a gust. Metal. Speaking metal, like it didn't need an audience. He closed his eyes and saw a square of blue tape on black mat, the edges too clean for him to live in. He opened his eyes and found the hall empty. On the walk to the lot, Maya bumped her shoulder against her father's arm. Not an accident. "Hungry," she said. "Always," he said. They stood at the curb, waiting for the light to change. The pedestrian icon blinked to white. A little man walking toward a future he couldn't see. Marcus looked up at the sky's washed-out blue and felt the day do a slow swivel inside his chest. He heard the chain ping again on a small gust and counted 4 in. "Hold. 6 out. Big day," Maya said. "Big day," he agreed, and stepped off the curb when the world said cross. The roll-up door stuttered halfway, then caught and climbed, grinding out a tune like a stubborn throat clearing. Heat slid in off the street and met rubber and solvent, the newborn smell of a place that hadn't decided what stories to keep. Blue painter's tape spelled crooked letters on the glass. "Second chance." Their edges lifted just enough to show they were human. Inside, Rivera stood on a ladder with a socket wrench and a shoulder under steel. "One more quarter turn," he said, ratchet, clicking in the rhythm of patience. Tyler crouched below, steadying the crossbeam with both palms and a jaw he'd learned to unclench. "Bubble center," Rivera asked. Tyler didn't look at the level. He eyed the chain angle where it met the beam, read the geometry in his bones, and nodded. "Square." Marcus pressed a palm to the first bag while they pinned the hangers. Canvas breathed out the cold of the truck it had slept in. Chain whispered over hook, found its seat, and eased into stillness with a note that settled low in the ribs. He left his hand there a second longer than necessary, like a man taking a pulse. At the front counter, plywood, sanded smooth and varnished with stubborn Sarah, unpacked a banker's box, waivers, 3 languages, clipboards with rounded corners, pens chained to screws sunk into wood. She lined them up in a grid. Only she recognized, and placed a small brass bell by the sign-up sheet. Its first ring came out timid and apologetic. The second decided it was a bell. Maya swept a skin of sawdust off brand-new mats. The broom sighed along seams. Grit gathered like tiny punctuation marks. She wore keys on a ring that chimed against her thigh, and a t-shirt with the sleeves cut at angles. On the wall, the hand-lettered board looked back with permanent promises. Sliding scale. Nobody turned away. Bring your breath. At 7 on the dot, the sidewalk produced a line that didn't know it was a line. Until it stood there, 6 kids in mismatched shorts, a grandmother in white sneakers, a woman pushing a stroller, a mail carrier still in blues, a man with a forearm scar and groceries. In a canvas tote, the streetlight over the door hummed. A dog up the block barked once and reconsidered. "Welcome," Maya said as she propped the door with a wedge. "Water's on the left. Shoes off on the right. Sign here if you can. There if you can't." She stamped "welcome" more than paid and made it look like policy. A boy with ears 2 sizes too big stepped onto the mat and froze, as if church rules applied. He pointed at the bag with reverence, not yet embarrassed into hiding. "Can I?" "Later," Marcus said, gentle. "First, we learn how to walk." They started with line, toes on tape, knees soft, hips where truth lives. Marcus stacked their bones and spoke low so they'd lean in. "We build a house," he told them. "Foundation before roof, rooms before paint." The grandmother snorted, then laughed, caught herself, and let the laughter go where it needed. Rivera took a corner and taught falling. He let his own body tip and land knee, seat, shoulders showing how to meet ground without paying extra. Tyler shadowed, catching wrists and guiding elbows with a humility that fit him better than pride ever had. Sarah worked the desk like triage. She filed cash where it belonged, copied forms in pairs. One for them, one for the box, wrote dates with a pen that never skipped, and kept an ear on the floor for trouble that sounded like bravado. Above her head, a Polaroid showed 4 people in front of a rolled-up door, no one quite centered. She glanced at it between stampings like a woman checking a map she could feel under her skin. When the first class broke, the room held steam, and the chemical sweetness of new mat. Phones stayed in bags. The sound was feet, breath, chain. On the back wall, a box fan chopped the heat into a breeze that smelled like tape and hope. A pair of Academy Greys drifted in next, a patrol partner with his cap tucked into his belt, and a woman whose posture said she spent her days convincing doors to open. They paid full price and shook hands like neighbors. 10 minutes later, a ballet kid in pink tights tiptoed onto the mat, looked down at the tape square, and decided balance meant something new. Mid-morning, a man in a suit stopped at the threshold and didn't cross. Hair perfect, smile embalmed. He slid a card across the counter with 2 fingers. "Iron Forge Holdings, we're asking you to cease disparagement," he said, the syllables air-conditioned. Sarah lifted a laminated sheet that said, "Media and Legal Inquiries. Email only," and tapped the address with a pen chain. "We don't do disparagement," she said. "We do receipts." Marcus looked over from the line of kids, learning to frame their faces without flinching. "We teach people to keep their breath," he said. "If that disparages you, fix your problem." The man's smile died politely. "We'll be in touch," he said, which meant nothing and a little bit of threat. The bell rang on his way out, bright as a nickel thrown on a drum. Afternoon thinned. The playlist looped and forgot itself. On the sidewalk, heat shivered like a trick. Maya filmed 10 clean seconds, hands peeling wrists, heads turning just enough, and labeled the file with a date and a checksum before tucking it on a drive. Not for the internet. Not yet. Some things needed to live here first. A woman came in with a girl half hidden behind her leg. The mother's shoulders wore the weight you get from speaking to offices through glass. She hovered at the tape edge, like the mat might break. "Rule or bone. First class is on us," Maya said, dropping into a crouch so the girl could look her in the eye without climbing. "We start by falling on purpose. After that, the ground stops feeling like a surprise." The girl nodded with the authority of children who haven't learned to dilute their yes. 10 minutes later, she hit the mat with a thump, rolled like a comma, popped up grinning, and clapped once for herself, because no one had told her not to. Between sessions, Tyler rubbed a scuff off the new bag with the tail of his shirt. "Feels different," he said to nobody. "Like the rooms on your side." Rivera tightened a hanger bolt, a whisper more, and listened for the chain. The chain gave a small, contented sound, metal agreeing with load. "Rooms notice," he said. "They remember who raises them." The mail carrier, calves like facts, finished a round of footwork and leaned on his knees, sweat cooling. "You got a kids class?" he asked, breathing through his nose like a pro. "My nephew thinks screens are cardio." 6. Marcus said. We make them dodge without flinching and carry water without spilling. Good, the carrier said. He spills everything. At 5, a summer program spilled 6 teens and a counselor into the doorway. They brought noise as a shield and left half of it on the mat. Marcus split them into pairs and made their hands negotiate space. One joker kept up a commentary until his partner slipped a clean frame under his jaw, and he felt breath get narrower. His mouth changed shape. "Oh," he said, the vowel long and honest. "Gentle," Marcus told them. "Power isn't the point. Clarity is." Just before dusk, a white envelope slid under the door and caught against the wedge. Sarah fished it with a ruler and opened it with a key, so the fold would behave in court, if it ever needed to. Letter of concern. Heavy stock. Signatures that looked like expensive weather. Words like defamation, tortious interference, immediate cessation. She passed it down the counter. Rivera read it and scratched his eyebrow with a knuckle. "They bought a thesaurus," he said. Maya set the letter under the bell, placed a copy in a folder labeled "Threats," and mailed herself a photograph of both. "Paper remembers," she said, almost cheerful. Evening softened. The last kid left with a fruit punch and instructions to practice footwork in the kitchen between fridge and stove. The grandmother hugged the air around people and made it count. The patrol partner folded cash into the donation jar for hard weeks and did it so no one would have to thank him. They rolled the wedge in, latched the door, and made the open sign go dark. The room exhaled. Chain on the rack made one last settling ring. A small, satisfied note. "Food," Maya asked from the counter, swinging her feet. "Food," Marcus said, flipping off the back lights and leaving the front half lit, like a stage after curtain. 2 doors down, a taco truck turned on its neon fish. They ate standing on asphalt that radiated a day's worth of decisions, grease, slicked napkins. Salsa bit in a way that woke you up without stealing anything. Tyler stared at the blue fish with the red tongue and laughed, surprised by his own laughter. "Didn't know I was allowed to like anything," he said. Rivera raised a foam cup to dumb luck and second breath. He said, "They clinked." Soda fizzed like applause. Across town, a letter thick with commission. Letterhead waited on a stone counter until a man with an empty calendar opened it. Revocation. Noncompliance. Immediate effect. He set it on a brace he no longer wore and watched his reflection flatten in the glass. He typed 2 lies and deleted them, typed 1 truth and deleted that too. The refrigerator motor chose a time to stop that felt personal. Morning again. The wedge stuck and relented. Sun found the blue tape letters and made them look fresher than they deserved. The bell learned confidence. The day assembled itself out of people: 2 nurses with graveyard eyes, a warehouse picker with wrists like rope, a kid who'd convinced his older brother this wasn't dancing. Marcus taught a class on boundary like other men teach grammar. He set them opposite each other, palms open, feet planted. "Say no with your bones," he told them. Everything after that is follow-through. The door opened on the suit again. A new smile stretched over the old one. He held his card like a warrant. "Last warning," he said. "You're eroding brand value." Maya slid a laminated page across the counter. "We don't say your name in here," she said. "If you want to argue about air, there's court for that." She stamped "Welcome" on the back of his card and handed it back to him without blinking. He left. The bell laughed him out. Afternoon slipped into a kinder temperature. The first t-shirt sold looked wrong on the man who bought it, and perfect on his grin. The ballet kid learned to pivot on the ball of her foot and kept her arms home. The mail carrier's nephew arrived and spilled exactly nothing. They closed with a slow sweep, pushing the day into corners the mop would forgive. The mats radiated a warmth that had nothing to do with the thermostat. Marcus stood in the blue tape square and listened the long, contented breath of AC, the city beyond the glass. The chain on the bag rack seated where steel meets weight. No noise now, no reason. Good bones, Rivera said, tapping the uprights. Good rules, Sara said, laying a last form into a labeled folder like a blanket. Maya locked the register, pocketed the keys, and leaned her shoulder against her father's arm. What happens when it gets bigger than us? She asked without staging the question. It already is, he said, and when someone tries to take it, he studied the crosswalk light outside the white walking man, and the red numbers counting down, always counting. We keep our breath, he said. We make a box when we need one. We don't go first to fists. He flexed his hand once and let it rest. We hold ourselves higher than they ask. She nodded. Okay. They killed the lights. The sign on the glass kept its shape in the half-dark. The first bag hung neat and quiet, chain-seated, hook-honest. Outside, a freight train shouldered the night, couplers clanking in a language gravity spoke fluently. The sound rolled over rooftops and poles and doors and came through the cinder blocks soft as weather. In the new room under steel and tape and fresh promises, the chain made no sound at all. It didn't need to. In the end, this story isn't about a punch. It's about breath. The quiet, stubborn decision to keep your dignity. When the room tries to take it, Marcus reminds us that courage often looks ordinary, showing up, telling the truth, setting a boundary, documenting the fact, and refusing to humiliate anyone, especially when you could. Justice here is not fireworks. It's a steady light. It says, break the toxic silence, name the harm, and then act with restraint and clarity. Real gold doesn't fear the fire, and character is what you do when no one's watching. For those navigating unfair bosses, frayed families, or communities split by noise and labels, remember, you can step out of harmful patterns, choose better mirrors, and build spaces where every body and every story has room to breathe. You reap what you sow, so patience, accountability, and mercy, and the long haul will show what you're made of. This is a call to face injustice without becoming it, to leave relationships that shrink you, and to measure strength not by how hard you hit, but by how precisely you refuse to. If this resonated, tell me what line stayed with you. Have you lived a moment where you kept your breath and drew your own square? Share it below so others can learn from your road. Tap like if the message mattered, and subscribe to stay close for more true-to-life tales that challenge, steady, and inspire. Until next time, may your nights be quiet, your mornings kind, and your courage patient enough to carry you toward a wider, gentler peace.